Chad Brendel again, Bearcat Journal covers Cincinnati. We've gotten to know him since all of the discussion that Cincinnati would join the Big 12. Well, that's happened. This is their first year. Chad joins us with Paul Craig. I'm David Smoak on 365 Sports. Chad, this is a game. You have Cincinnati in a little bit of a free fall. Baylor has been in one really almost since the beginning. And yet it's important, right, that somebody has to win this game?
Yeah, I mean, for Cincinnati, they started out pretty well. They stubbed their toe against Miami of Ohio, and that kind of started this current trend. The problem for Cincinnati is, even though they weren't getting wins, ultimately they were playing fairly well up until Iowa State last week. Iowa State last week was a disaster, and you can't, you're in a spot where you can't let that become the norm for the rest of the season. So this Baylor game is incredibly important for Scott Satterfield and company.
Chad, what do you feel that Cincinnati will lead into against the Baylor defense that's not stopped the run very much? You know, Emory Jones can be an adventure either way, and to protect him the most and have the most success moving the football.
I mean, the most effective thing they've done with consistency is run Emory Jones. Up until the Iowa State game, though, I mean, they had been averaging well over 200 yards a game on the ground. They're one of the best rush offenses in the country. So you would think there has to be a focus to get back to that, to be a team that, you know, just tries to kind of lean on you in the run game and use the pass as a supplement to the run game. Part of it against Iowa State, they were behind most of the game, so they didn't really get a chance to kind of find a groove. But, I mean, ultimately, that's been their bread and butter. They've got a couple really talented backs and a quarterback that can run. If you're playing a team that can't stop the run, probably be wise to see how much you can run the ball.
Chad, Iowa State's started off as a little bit of a surprise team. How much of just last week, too, was you think that the Cyclones are pretty good based on what you saw?
I think their defense is really stout, and especially if they get you in a situation where you have to throw, and their pass defense, especially their defensive secondary, is really good. They play tight coverage. You don't see a lot of guys running open, and the guys that are running open, their safeties are excellent over the top. So, I think just as that game played out and Iowa State built their lead, they just squeezed the life out of the Cincinnati passing game. If you can play from in front on Iowa State, I think, you can probably be in a lot better position because their run defense isn't as stout. But if they can just pin their ears back, come after you, and play coverage, you're probably going to be in trouble against them.
Chad, Nippert Stadium is a great environment. Does that lose any luster with the 3-game losing streak?
It hasn't so far, but it'll be interesting on Saturday. People are frustrated. This is a program that hasn't lost in a pretty good stretch. So hitting a rough patch, it's going to be interesting to see. The weather will be interesting as well. It looks like the weather is going to be done. There's some rain today and tomorrow. It looks like it should be done by Saturday morning, but if they're dealing with any lingering weather, you worry that everybody's going to be tempted to take a week off, I think, is a decent way to put it.
Chad, what is your, mid-season assessment of what Scott Satterfield has improved so far with this Bearcat team?
Not right now, not a whole lot. Unfortunately, it feels like the arrow is kind of trending in the wrong direction because of that Iowa State game. I think they did a really good job in the transfer portal getting Power 5 level talent at the top of this roster. I think the biggest problem that they have with, I think over the past 3 years prior to this year, there's 16 guys in the NFL off of Cincinnati's roster over the past 3 years. I don't think that they have done a great job replacing that number of talent walking out the door. And then you have the defections with the coaching change and, 23 transfers brought in by Satterfield. unfortunately, what people don't tell you about the transfer portal is you can go get Power 5 level contributors, but it's really difficult to go find Power 5 level, stars, very top of the roster guys. And I don't think they did enough of that in this cycle. But it's hard to judge right now because it's a team that it feels like is losing confidence. And, these are guys through the Fickle era, like they won 9, 10, 11, 12 games every year. Most of these guys have never experienced a 4-game losing streak. So the key for Baylor in this game, I think, is if you can jump out early and, again, put their confidence in doubt, I think Baylor's in a good spot. But as far as what's improved, it's really hard to say because things are kind of going the opposite way. The defensive line has been really good as expected. From there, not a whole lot, gentlemen.
Chad, you're telling me not everybody in the transfer portal's Keon Coleman. That's kind of how it feels. Yeah. Like Baylor went and got like 11 transfers and everybody's like, oh, they've retooled. And quite frankly, like maybe one of them's made any impact out of like 11 guys. That's super notable. So yeah, it's not an exact science of you just go and grab your groceries and it all turns into a terrific recipe, right?
Right. Sometimes, you find out that the tomato was bad right. And the pasta was the wrong pasta. And next thing you know, you're ordering carry out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's a reason guys are available sometimes, and it's not just NIL, or whatever.
Right.
But you mentioned the run defense, and obviously that was a big part of the hype during the offseason about the positives of what that defensive line could turn into. So you mentioned that they're kind of living up to that. What about that back seven? I mean, Baylor's a team they're talking about a lot of struggles running the football, and they're going to have to pass to run. How is Cincinnati's pass defense stacked up so far?
It is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, guys. If you look at number of passes completed in the country, Cincinnati has allowed the third fewest pass completions in the country. Like every game, it's like the quarterback completed 14, 12, 13, 14 passes. But they also completed 14 passes for 275 yards. So they're giving up an uncanny amount of big plays on the back end. The problem being, we knew this defensive line was very good and going to be very good stopping the run. They have not been very good getting to the quarterback. Now, I know that's something Baylor has struggled with, so that's going to be another point of contention, I think, in terms of who wins this game. If Cincinnati can bring down the quarterback, that changes their ability to play pass defense a little bit. But as it stands, they have not given up many completions, but they have given up a ton of yards and allowed teams to be super efficient passing the ball. And that's kind of the boom or bust with a pass defense that is designed to get after the quarterback and create turnovers. Well, here's the problem, guys. They're not sacking the quarterback. They're not creating turnovers, and they are giving up big plays. So there's no boom, and there's a lot of bust in Cincinnati's pass defense. If Baylor needs to throw it 25, 30, 35 times a game, it's going to be really interesting to see how Cincinnati holds up.
If they need to do that, they probably need to pivot to it, Chad. As a matter of fact, to hear you talk and to hear us talk this week about what Baylor does well, it appears that both these teams are kind of in the same spot, facing each other. Is that
right?
The one thing that each team does well, the other team doesn't stop well. So this could get really weird and interesting,
or it could be a hell of a game.
You know what I called it last night on our podcast? I called this game the movable force against the resistible object.
Yeah. And you also mentioned if Baylor gets off to a good start, and other than maybe a little bit early against Utah, they haven't done that either.
Cincinnati hasn't either, so it might be 3-0 at the end of the first quarter, guys.
Hey, Chad, what have you thought of? You mentioned Emory Jones earlier and how he's been effective in the running game, but obviously very turnover prone. What have you just made of his game overall?
So I think he has gotten a little jumpy, a little antsy in the pocket. Cincinnati their offensive line has done a good job run blocking. They have not given him a lot of time in the passing game. So it almost feels like his brain is not allowing him to get to the backside of a play. So it's kind of, take the snap, look at the first option. If that's not there, check out the check down. And if he doesn't like that, then he's taken off. And, that's not a good place to be if you're a quarterback. It's felt like they've had guys on the backside open. And I wonder how much of that is teams are watching and saying, you know what, like we don't even have to guard, the boundary side, or we don't have to pay any attention to the backside of the play because he's not getting there to beat us that way. So, wherever his head goes when the ball is snapped, you focus there, you stop the check down, and then you wait for him to run. Yes, the offensive line has been a little porous, but I think he needs to start regaining that confidence to stand in there and get to the backside of the play. The other thing that's been really odd, you watched him through camp, you watched him in their opening game against Eastern Kentucky, and then against Pitt when they beat Pitt. Like, he was throwing an outstanding deep ball. And we haven't seen it in 4 games. I mean, he has missed. You go back to the Iowa State game, first quarter, 5th play of the game. He's got a guy on a deep post running 10 yards free of the defense, and he overthrows him by 4 yards. I mean, I think I could have scored a touchdown on that play.
Yeah.
And, he had one in the BYU game down the sideline. And, early in that game that could have changed the momentum of that game. And he misses the guy by 3 yards over the top. I don't know if it's a matter of trying to be perfect, not putting enough air under the ball, like whatever the case may be. He is not putting himself in the position to make big plays through the air. And it's crazy. Like, you look at the low scores for Cincinnati going into the Iowa State game, they had the most first downs in the country. Like, they were averaging almost 23, 24 first downs a game, but they weren't making any big plays. So they were having to move the ball, 11 yards at a time. And it just puts so much stress on the offense to complete these long 13, 14, 15 play drives without making any mistakes. And it's not sustainable. And, that's kind of where Emory, I think, is not doing himself or the offense any favors, because you hit a couple of those big plays, the defense has to play different. They have to respect your ability to go over the top. And, right now teams don't have to respect this offense 15 yards past the line of scrimmage.
Chad, Emory Jones kind of reminds me of that pitcher on your favorite Major League Baseball team that's like the 5th starter that he stresses you out, but every once in a while you'll like check your phone and go, oh, he's got a no-hitter going through 7. How did this happen? And you tune it in. And, then you're like, okay, well, maybe he's turned the corner. And then the next time he, hits the first 2 batters and walks 7, right?
He gives up 6 runs in 3 innings, and you're wondering, well, okay, it looks great now. He's pitched, 13 innings and allowed 6 runs. That's pretty good. No. That's not a bad analogy. I mean, it hits very close to home, because it does feel like, there are times like you're like, all right, it seems like he's getting things together and the team is moving the ball and things are starting to click. And then, you don't see it again for 5 quarters.
Chad, this is kind of off topic a little bit, but would you ever have thought that a Cincinnati Bearcat would be dating the biggest superstar in the entire world? Does that even resonate? The whole Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce thing around Cincinnati, is that even a talked about subject at all, or what's kind of made of it?
Oh yeah, well, it's talked about a lot in my house because I have a 13-year-old daughter.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Who, remember, I've been doing this for 16 years, so you know what my daughter's name is, right? I don't think you guys know this.
No.
My daughter's name is Kelsey.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
She's named after Jason.
Awesome.
So
Golly.
I tell her all the time, she's like, I'm named after Travis. He's the cute one. Yeah. I'm like, honey, in 2010, Travis Kelsey sucked. Yeah. Like, he was kicked off the team when you were born.
He was a quarterback, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, he was like a gimmick quarterback, right. and then he got kicked off the team Butch Jones' first year for partying a little too hard at the Sugar Bowl and failing an NCAA mandated drug test. But she's also a diehard Swiftie, so now she is convinced that because Dad knows Travis, that Kelsey is going to meet Taylor.
Oh, gosh.
Well, I mean, if you have any clout, right? Yeah, I mean, my goodness, you ought to get that. You ought to make that. It sounds like you entering this game as someone who's covering Cincinnati, and as we have covered Baylor, we really don't know what the hell we're going to see. Either it's going to be a 17-6 game somehow, one way or the other, or it could end up being just one that is a hellacious game that's 31-28 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting for me from a Cincinnati perspective, I did not see a team with a lot of fight when the going got tough against Iowa State. And coming off a 3-game losing streak, coming off a bye, like, that's just not normal for here. Like, you know, the one thing that Cincinnati has been known for is they'll stand in the middle of the ring and trade haymakers with you. And I didn't see that last week. So it's going to be very telling the type of emotion this team plays with Saturday. Because if they come out flat again, or if, you know, one or two things go wrong for Baylor or in Baylor's favor early and they start hanging their heads, that is not a great sign for what's to come over the last 5 games for Cincinnati. I fully expect this team to come out angry, or at least I hope they will, based on that performance that they had last week. So that part's going to be interesting. I mean, we have seen in this league a couple times already this year, teams that have picked themselves up off the mat. You know, you looked at Oklahoma State early and it was like, oh my, like that's,
yep.
They might need to get rid of Gundy is what people were saying 3 weeks into the season. Texas Tech has kind of picked themselves up off the mat. It'll be interesting to see if one of these two teams uses this opportunity Saturday to kind of get things going in the opposite direction as we head down the stretch.
Hey, Chad, we appreciate you, buddy. Thank you so much, and good luck with Taylor Swift meeting your daughter, Kelsey. That's your number one target the rest of the year for Christmas. That's Chad Brendel. He's fantastic at what he does. Appreciate him. Cover